I never thought I'd end up here, in the middle of nowhere, on a rusting skeleton of steel surrounded by endless waves. Yet desperation has a way of dragging you to places you swore you'd never go. That's what I tell myself whenever I think back to the decision. The one that put me on this oil rig. It started with the bills. My life on shore had unraveled faster than I could mend it. Debts stacked high, rent overdue, and jobs that promised stability slipping through my fingers like sand. I wasn't a failure, not completely, but I was circling the drain. When the offer came, a position on a remote oil rig with pay that dwarfed anything I could have made back home, I convinced myself it was the only option. Everyone I told gave me the same look, a mix of pity and unease. They spoke about rigs like this one in hushed tones, whispering about the storms, the accidents, the men who came back, changed, or didn't come back at all. One guy at the bar, face weathered and cracked like old leather, leaned close when he overheard me. His breath stank of whiskey as he muttered, "That rig's not right. They've been recruiting too often. Men vanish and they send for more. Don't go." I laughed it off, but his words stuck to me, nagging at the edges of my mind as I signed the papers. By the time I boarded the supply ship that would take me out there, it was too late. The journey was long and dismal. The crew running the boat barely spoke, and when they did, their words were clipped and tense, like they were carrying a weight too heavy for conversation. I stood at the railing, watching the horizon, watching the coast vanish behind me until there was nothing but water. The sea stretched out endlessly, steel gray under a sky that promised no comfort. Hours blurred together. It was the fog I noticed first. It didn't roll in naturally. It thickened around us, swallowing the ship until even the sun was a weak smudge above. The engines hummed steady, but the ocean's voice was muffled. The world narrowed to a few yards of visibility, and inside that curtain, I felt eyes on me. One of the deckhands crossed himself when the rig finally appeared, its black silhouette rising from the mist like the bones of some great dead beast. At first I thought it was the fog playing tricks. It didn't look real. Steel towers jutted into the sky, cranes hung motionless, and the platform seemed to sag under the weight of rust. Water slapped against the pillars, but I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't the sea moving. It was the rig itself, breathing. We docked at the lower platform. The crew unloaded my bags wordlessly. No goodbyes, no encouragement. Just relief to be leaving me behind. The boat pulled away before my boots even touched the slick metal surface. I turned to watch it vanish into the fog, shrinking into nothing until I was alone. The silence hit me next. Oil rigs I'd heard were supposed to be noisy, clanging metal, shouts, engines roaring. But here the sound was wrong. There was only the low moan of wind cutting through pipes and the steady drip of condensation from corroded beams. It was too quiet. Even my own breathing felt out of place, too loud against the stillness. That's when I noticed the workers. They stood scattered across the deck, frozen in place like statues. Dark figures in grease-stained uniforms, helmets low over their faces. None of them moved, not even when I waved or tried to smile. Their heads tilted, all of them, just slightly, as though following me with invisible eyes. My throat tightened. It was like walking into a room where everyone had been talking about you. And then they all went silent. A man finally broke away from the group and approached me. His boots rang sharply on the deck, the only confident sound I'd heard since arrival. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with lines carved deep into his face from years of exposure. His eyes were pale, almost gray, and they didn't blink as he studied me. "You're the transfer," he said. His voice was flat, without greeting or warmth. I nodded, shifting under his gaze. "Yeah, first shift. Follow me." He cut me off, already turning toward the inner walkways. I grabbed my bag and trailed after him, boots echoing against rusted grating. The others didn't move, didn't speak. Their stillness lingered behind me like a shadow I couldn't shake. The rig was a maze. Corridors twisted in unnatural ways, some ending abruptly, others looping back to where we started. The walls dripped with condensation, streaked with rust that looked like dried blood in the dim light. Pipes rattled above us as if something unseen crawled through them. Every few steps the air shifted, sharp with salt, then heavy with the stench of oil, then metallic like old blood. No matter how far we walked, the silence pressed down. Even the man leading me, who I assumed was the foreman, spoke little. Once I asked how many men worked here. His answer was a single number, muttered without turning. Too many. Eventually, we reached the living quarters, a row of steel doors, each one dented and scarred. He gestured toward one. "This is yours." I stepped inside. The room was small, barely enough for a cot bolted to the floor, a metal locker, and a single flickering light overhead. The air smelled faintly of mildew, like the space hadn't been opened in months. On the cot sat a folded set of coveralls and a helmet, both marked with grease stains. I turned back to ask him something, anything, but he was already gone. His footsteps had vanished into the rig's endless hum. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling where water droplets gathered and fell in slow rhythm. Every creak of the rig, every shift of metal made me flinch. I swore I could hear footsteps in the corridor outside, pausing at my door, waiting. But when I sat up, holding my breath, the silence was complete again. I thought of the man in the bar, of his warning. Men vanish and they send for more? My chest tightened, and I wondered how many before me had laid on this very cot, listening to the same unnatural silence. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a restless half-sleep. That's when the dream came, or maybe it wasn't a dream. I saw the rig from above floating in the sea like a coffin. Something vast and black coiled beneath the surface, circling, watching. The steel towers above groaned and bent as though bowing to it. And I felt, more than saw, that it wanted me. When I jolted awake, my sheets were damp with sweat. The air smelled wrong, salty and rotten, like fish left out too long. I pressed my face to my hands, whispering to myself that it was only nerves, only the stress of arrival. But deep down I knew. This wasn't just another job. The rig wasn't just metal and machinery. It was something else, something alive, and I had already stepped too far to turn back. That was the night I realized the transfer wasn't just about me coming here. It was about the rig pulling me in, another body, another soul, another offering to whatever it served, and I hadn't even seen the rules yet. The morning after my arrival, I woke to the sound of boots outside my door. They didn't stop, just passed by, heavy and deliberate, fading into the endless maze of metal corridors. I dragged myself out of the cot, my head heavy from restless dreams, and for a moment, I almost convinced myself the night had been nothing but nerves. Almost. The smell of oil hit me when I stepped into the hallway. Thick, bitter, metallic, it clung to the walls and seeped into my skin. The light overhead flickered, buzzing faintly, like it struggled to stay alive. The corridor stretched on in both directions, but I wasn't left to wander. The same man who had led me to my room last night stood waiting a few feet away, arms crossed over his broad chest, eyes like cold stone. "Orientation," he said. No greeting, no explanation, just that word. He turned on his heel and I followed. We wound through the labyrinth of the rig. The place groaned around us, pipes shifting, steel grinding, unseen machinery beating like a mechanical heart. Shadows moved with the sway of light bulbs, and I kept catching myself glancing over my shoulder. I half expected those silent workers from yesterday to be trailing me, heads tilted, eyes hidden. Finally, he stopped at a door. The paint was peeling, the hinges corroded, but the metal was thick, reinforced. He unlocked it with a ring of keys that jangled like broken bones, then pushed it open. The room inside was different from the rest of the rig, cleaner almost, though the walls were still streaked with rust. A single table stood in the center, scarred and pitted, with a sheet of metal bolted onto its surface. Something was carved into it, lines etched so deeply they had nearly cut through. The foreman stepped aside and gestured toward it. "Raid," I stepped closer. The words were rough, uneven, hacked into the steel by hand. 7 lines, 7 rules. The letters were jagged, each stroke gouged deep as though written in desperation or fury. Some of them were stained darker than rust, and for a moment I thought it was dried blood. I forced myself to focus, reading them one by one. Rule 1. Never leave your quarters between 2:13 a.m. and 3:09 a.m. Rule 2. Do not respond to voices in the machinery. Rule 3. Never eat food prepared after midnight. Rule 4. Do not look into the drill shaft after dusk. Rule 5. Sleep only in your assigned quarters, never elsewhere. Rule 6. Never stare into the ocean at dawn. Rule 7. Never resign. Leaving the rig is forbidden. My mouth went dry as I read them. The rules made no sense. They weren't safety procedures, not in any conventional way. They sounded like warnings scribbled by a madman. I looked up, but the foreman's eyes pinned me in place. "These are not suggestions," he said. His voice was low, steady, without room for argument. "You follow them, or you don't last." I tried to laugh, to mask the unease twisting in my gut. "What, is this some kind of initiation? Scare the new guy?" His face didn't move. Not a flicker of humor, not even anger. Just that stone-cold stare. "You think this is a joke?" I swallowed. "I don't know what this is." He stepped closer. His presence was heavy, suffocating, like standing too close to an engine vibrating with dangerous energy. "The rules are the only reason this rig still stands. Men come here thinking they can bend them. Men think they're stronger, smarter. The sea takes them, every time." The air felt colder, the walls pressing in. My heart hammered. I wanted to argue, to demand explanations, but the words died on my tongue. Something about the way he said it, like he wasn't warning me but condemning me, shut me up. He tapped the table once with a thick finger, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Etch them into your memory. Every hour you're here, they will weigh on you. Ignore them, and you'll feed what lives below." I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, another man entered the room. He was thin, pale, his uniform hanging loose on his frame. His eyes were sunken, the skin under them shadowed like he hadn't slept in weeks. He carried a tray, coffee, bread, something gray that might have been eggs. He didn't look at me. He set it down on the corner of the table, turned, and left without a word. The foreman gestured at the tray. "Eat. You'll need strength." I stared at it, then back at the rules. Rule 3, never eat food prepared after midnight. I checked my watch. 9:17 a.m. I forced a smile, though it felt brittle. "Guess this passes." His face remained unreadable. For now. I sat, the chair scraping across the floor with a shriek. The bread was stale, the coffee bitter, but I forced it down. Every bite tasted like rust. The foreman stood silent, watching me, as if judging whether I'd follow through or falter. When I finished, he finally spoke again. "You'll see things, hear things. Don't question them. Don't try to understand. You are here to work. Follow the rules and maybe you'll make it to payday." "Maybe?" I asked, my voice unsteady. His eyes narrowed. "You think the sea cares about your pay? About your life? No one is safe here. Not me, not you. The rules are all we have." A shiver crawled up my spine. I tried to steady my voice. "What happens if someone breaks them?" His jaw tightened. "You'll see." He turned abruptly and left the room. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone with the etched table and the words that burned in my mind. I sat there for what felt like hours, tracing the grooves with my fingertips. Each line was deep, carved by someone who needed to make sure they were never forgotten. I wondered how many men before me had read them. How many had followed them? How many hadn't? When I finally left the room, the corridors seemed darker. Every pipe hissed with whispers I wanted to ignore. Every shadow lingered too long at the edge of sight. The rules echoed in my head, pounding with every step. Never leave your quarters between 2:13 a.m. and 3 a.m. Why that exact time? Why not before? Why not after? What waited in those 47 minutes? Do not respond to voices in the machinery. My skin crawled at the memory of last night, of footsteps outside my door, of faint whispers seeping through the walls. Never eat food prepared after midnight. The gray eggs sat heavy in my stomach. What would they have done to me if I'd eaten them at 12:01 instead of 9:17? Each rule dug deeper into me, a hook set beneath the skin. I wanted to laugh it off, to call it superstition. But every instinct screamed otherwise. That night, as I lay on my cot, the rules hung over me like chains. The rig creaked, the sea lapped against its bones, and I swore I heard breathing in the walls. My watch ticked closer to midnight, then crawled past, minute by minute. When it hit 2:13, I sat upright, holding my breath. The air changed, heavy, electric. The silence deepened into something unnatural. The corridor outside shifted with soft, deliberate steps. My door rattled gently, not from wind, not from machinery, but from something that wanted in. Every instinct screamed at me to move, to hide, to scream. But I remembered Rule 1. Never leave your quarters between 2:13 a.m. and 3 a.m. So I stayed. I sat frozen on my cot, sweat slicking my skin. while the handle of my door turned once. Slowly, testing, then stopped. For 47 minutes. The rig became a different world. I heard whispers in the pipes, saw shadows shift across the thin crack of light beneath my door, felt something brush against the walls as if circling me. At 3 exactly, the air lightened. The silence broke. The rig returned to its hollow hum as though nothing had happened. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I couldn't. By dawn, I realized the rules weren't written to scare me. They weren't myths or warnings passed down by old hands. They were survival, and I had barely survived my first test. I didn't have time to recover from the night before. The foreman came for me again in the late afternoon, his boots striking sparks of dread in my stomach with every step. He didn't knock. He never knocked. He simply opened the door and said, "Shift starts in 10. Then he was gone. I pulled on the greasy coveralls and helmet that had been left for me, the fabric stiff, the smell of oil and mildew clinging to it no matter how much I tried to shake it out. My hands trembled as I zipped it up. It wasn't fear of the work. I'd done heavy labor before. It was fear of what the work meant here, on this rig, where rules replaced reason. The sun was bleeding into the horizon when I stepped onto the main deck. Rusted beams jutted into the sky, silhouetted against the dying light. The air was thick with salt, metal, and something else. An acrid stench I couldn't place, like burning plastic. The fog had returned too, thicker than before, wrapping the rig in a suffocating cocoon. The other workers were already out there. They moved with mechanical precision, each step and gesture deliberate, almost rehearsed. No one spoke. No one looked at me. Their faces were pale under the harsh floodlights, their eyes shadowed. I felt like an intruder in a ritual I wasn't meant to see. The foreman handed me a clipboard with a list of tasks. Walk the perimeter. Inspect the railings. Report anything loose. His voice was low, stripped of any inflection. I nodded, throat dry. That's it? His gaze sharpened, and for a moment I thought I'd broken another unspoken rule. That's it, he repeated, then turned away. So I walked. The grating beneath my boots creaked with every step. Below me, the ocean churned, dark and endless, flecked with the last dying streaks of sunlight. I forced myself to focus on the task, checking bolts, scanning railings, tapping metal with a wrench. Ordinary work. Simple. But the rig wasn't ordinary. The deeper into the fog I went, the more I realized how wrong the place felt. The corridors bent where they shouldn't. Some ladders led nowhere, vanishing into shadows above. I passed doors that rattled as though fists were pounding from the other side. Yet when I leaned closer, the sound stopped. I tried to distract myself by humming under my breath, but the fog swallowed the sound, smothered it. And then, faintly, I heard something else, a voice. At first I thought it was one of the crew, calling out through the fog. But the words were indistinct, slurred, as though carried through water. I froze, clipboard pressed to my chest. Help, me. The sound seeped from the pipes running along the wall, vibrating through the metal. My stomach dropped. I remembered Rule 2, do not respond to voices in the machinery. The voice came again, clearer now, desperate. Please, it's so dark. Don't leave me here. My throat tightened. It sounded human. It sounded close. I wanted to answer, wanted to call back, to prove I wasn't alone out here. But the rules burned in my mind. So I kept walking. The voice followed me, slipping through the pipes, moving ahead of me, behind me, always just out of reach. Sometimes it cried, sometimes it begged, sometimes it whispered my name. I quickened my pace, forcing myself not to look back. By the time I circled back to the main deck, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wrench. The foreman was waiting. He didn't ask if I'd heard it. He didn't need to. His eyes lingered on my face, reading the fear etched there. He gave the slightest nod, as if acknowledging that I'd passed some test. Stay on task, he said, then turned to the others. The hours dragged. Midnight approached. The floodlights buzzed, flickering at the edges. I forced myself to keep moving, checking bolts, tightening screws, scribbling meaningless notes onto the clipboard just to keep my hands busy. That's when I almost broke Rule 1. I was halfway down a narrow catwalk when I felt the sudden urge to return to my quarters. Exhaustion pressed down on me, my eyelids heavy, my body screaming for rest. I glanced at my watch. 2:08 a.m. I froze. The rule was clear. Never leave your quarters between 2:13 a.m. and 3 a.m., but I wasn't in my quarters. I was on the deck, alone, exposed. My chest constricted as panic surged through me. I started to run. The catwalk swayed under my boots, the fog thickening, swallowing the floodlights. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed myself faster, counting down the seconds in my head. 2:10, 2:11, 2:12. I rounded a corner just as the second hand clicked onto 2:13. The air changed instantly. The fog deepened into a suffocating shroud. The floodlights buzzed louder, flickering. Shadows crawled across the deck, stretching too far, moving against the light. Something followed me. I couldn't see it, not fully. But I felt it. Heavy footsteps on the metal, a presence pressing against my back, hot breath sliding along my neck. I didn't dare look over my shoulder. I forced myself forward, heart pounding, legs burning. Every corridor stretched longer than it should. Every turn twisted me deeper into the maze. I wasn't heading for my quarters anymore. I was just running, blind, desperate. The whispers returned. This time not from the pipes, but from the fog itself. They circled me, taunting, coaxing. "Stop running! Turn around! Just look!" I stumbled, nearly falling. My hands scraped against the railing, skin tearing on rust. I pushed myself up, sobbing, lungs on fire. Minutes bled together. The presence never stopped, never slowed. Always just behind me, always waiting. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. My watch ticked onto 3. The fog lifted. The shadows shrank. The air lightened, the world snapping back to the rig's usual groaning silence. I collapsed against the wall, shaking, drenched in sweat. My body screamed for rest, but my mind wouldn't let me stop replaying what had just happened. If I'd been slower, if I'd stumbled 1 second longer, if I'd dared to turn around. The foreman found me there minutes later. His face was unreadable as he helped me to my feet. "You almost didn't make it," he said simply. I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, demand to know what chased me, why this rig was cursed with such rules. But the words caught in my throat. He didn't wait for me to recover. He just turned and walked, and I followed like a broken animal, dragging my feet through the fog. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. I don't remember the work I did, only the constant pounding of my heart. The paranoia that something was still following me even after 3:00 had passed. When the foreman finally dismissed us, the crew dispersed wordlessly, melting into their quarters like ghosts. No one spoke. No one looked at me. Back in my room, I collapsed onto the cot, trembling. My hands were raw, rust embedded in the cuts. My mind replayed the chase, the whispers, the hot breath on my neck. I couldn't shake the image of shadows crawling against the light, of something inhuman waiting for me to falter. That was my first night shift, and I realized something terrifying. The rules weren't just about survival. They were about control. They kept us tethered, chained to this place, too terrified to resist, and I had already nearly broken one. After that first night, I told myself it couldn't get worse, that if I just kept my head down, followed the rules, I could endure it. I thought maybe the terror of the chase, the suffocating fog, the thing that had stalked me until 3 a.m., was the worst this place could offer. I was wrong. The next evening began like the last. Same silence, same fog wrapping the rig like a funeral shroud. The foreman said little when he handed me the clipboard again, and the crew didn't even glance at me. They moved through the motions like puppets tugged by invisible strings, heads down, faces blank. But something was different. I noticed it when I passed the first row of pipes near the drilling platform. A vibration hummed through the metal, low and steady, almost like a heartbeat. I laid a hand against it, and the pulse matched mine for a moment before shifting into something faster, unnatural. And then came the voices. At first, I thought it was the wind whistling through the steel. The sound rose and fell, a faint, airy hum that could almost pass as words if you didn't listen too closely. But I did listen. That was my mistake. The sound sharpened into whispers, threading through the pipes like water through veins. They were faint, indistinct, but undeniably human. Down here, it's cold. I froze, clipboard pressed tight against my chest. My throat closed, breath caught in my lungs. Another voice joined it, this one rasping, desperate. "Don't leave me. It hurts. Please, it hurts." I stumbled back from the pipes, heart pounding. I remembered Rule 2. Do not respond to voices in the machinery. The whispers multiplied, overlapping, weaving together into a chorus of agony. Some pleaded, some wept, some screamed so faintly it felt like the metal itself was sobbing. And then one voice cut through the rest, clear as a bell. It was my mother's. "Why did you leave me, son? Why did you come here?" I staggered, knees weak. My mother had died years ago, long before this nightmare of a job. Hearing her voice now, trembling with sorrow, hollow with grief, it was like knives in my chest. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't stop. The sound wasn't in my ears, it was in the rig. The pipes carried it, pumped it, bled it into the steel like the rig itself was speaking with all the stolen voices it had ever devoured. I wanted to scream back, to beg the voice to stop, to cry that I hadn't left her, that she wasn't real. But the rules echoed in my mind, sharp and merciless. Do not respond. So I clenched my jaw until it ached, forced my boots to move, forced myself down the corridor while the voices followed. Everywhere I went, they were there. Through the walls, beneath the grating, above in the ceiling pipes. They hissed and begged and mocked, weaving my name into their dirge. I passed one of the crew near the main shaft, his uniform stained, his face pale and empty. He didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge the sound. He just kept working, tightening bolts with dead eyes. The whispers slid around him like smoke, but he didn't react. I realized then that they all heard it. Every one of them. They just knew better than to respond. I tried to copy them, to keep my eyes down and my hands busy, but the voices clawed at me. They knew my secrets. They knew my fears. You'll never leave this place. The sea already owns you. You're next. At one point I dropped the wrench, my hands slick with sweat. It clattered against the deck, the sound like a gunshot. Instantly the whispers surged louder, frenzied, overlapping in a storm of voices. My name, over and over, screamed from 100 unseen throats. I bolted, wrench forgotten, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. The fog thickened, the shadows lengthened, but I didn't care. I just needed distance. I ducked into a side corridor, pressing myself against the wall, chest heaving. The metal was warm beneath my palms, vibrating with the endless chorus. And then the whispers changed. They quieted, grew softer, more intimate. One voice rose above the others, calm, soothing. "You don't belong here. You can leave. Just tell us you want to go." My blood turned to ice. It was offering me a way out. All I had to do was respond. All I had to do was break the rule. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood. My body trembled with the effort of silence. My throat ached with words I refused to let out. Seconds stretched into minutes. The voice coaxed me, promising release, promising freedom. And then slowly it turned cruel. "Coward. You'll rot here like the rest. We'll wear your voice next." I squeezed my eyes shut, tears burning. The sound faded, slipping back into the endless cacophony of whispers. When I finally stumbled out of the corridor, I felt hollow, scraped raw from the inside. My legs carried me on autopilot, my body working while my mind reeled. The foreman found me again before dawn, his eyes hard as stone. He didn't ask what I'd heard. He didn't have to. Instead, he said, "The rig knows you now. Don't let it inside." I wanted to demand answers, to scream at him for bringing me here, for forcing me into this nightmare. But my throat was ruined, my voice shredded by the effort of silence. When my shift ended, I collapsed on the cot, trembling. I pressed my face into the thin pillow, but the whispers lingered in my skull, echoing even in dreams. That was the night I understood something terrifying. The rig wasn't just haunted by echoes of the past, it was hungry, and it was learning my voice. Sleep had become impossible. Even when exhaustion finally dragged me under, the dreams weren't mine anymore. I'd jolt awake, drenched in sweat, hearing voices that weren't there, feeling breath on my neck when the room was empty. Every day bled into the next, but the nights, that was when the rig came alive, when the rules weren't just warnings, but lifelines. On the fifth night, the fog was worse than ever. It wasn't just rolling across the rig anymore. It was thick, suffocating, clinging to every surface until the floodlights were reduced to hazy orbs floating in a sea of white. I could barely see my hand in front of my face, yet the foreman still shoved the clipboard into my hands and sent me out. "Perimeter check," he said, voice flat, eyes hollow. I wanted to protest, to say that it was pointless, that I wouldn't see a damn thing in this soup, but his stare killed the words before they left my mouth. So I went. The catwalks were slick beneath my boots, the fog swallowing sound until even my footsteps felt muted, distant. Every few yards I'd stop, tap the railing, pretend to check bolts, scribble nonsense onto the clipboard. But my eyes weren't on the metal. They were on the fog. It moved wrong. Fog should drift, should swirl with the wind. This didn't. It clung. It pulsed. It crept forward in tendrils, curling over railings, slipping into gaps between pipes. It was alive. Halfway down the eastern platform, I heard it. A deep groan, metal twisting under strain. At first, I thought it was just the rig settling. But then I saw it. Movement in the fog. A shape, massive. It loomed at the edge of visibility, taller than the towers, wider than the cranes. Its outline shifted, crawling across the deck, impossibly large. My chest locked tight. The rules screamed in my mind. Never acknowledge the shape outside. But how could I not? The fog thinned just enough for me to see the glint of something, an arm. A limb? It dragged along the steel, screeching sparks. Its body was too large to comprehend, stretching into the fog until I couldn't tell where it ended. I dropped the clipboard. The clatter echoed, sharp, unnatural in the muffled air. The shape stopped. I froze, breath caught in my throat. The fog churned, coiling around the mass like it was breathing. Then it shifted again, crawling closer. The deck beneath me shuddered. Bolts rattled, pipes groaned. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs refused to move. The fog parted for a second, and I saw it. An eye, massive, unblinking, glowing faintly in the haze. It locked onto me, and in that moment, I felt stripped bare. It wasn't just looking at me. It was looking through me, peeling me open like a book. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood, forcing myself to stand still. Forcing myself not to scream. The eye lingered, unblinking, and then the shape shifted again, retreating into the fog. The deck trembled as it moved, the sound like thunder rolling across the steel. When it was gone, I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. My vision blurred, my body shaking uncontrollably. I had never felt so close to breaking. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled against the railing, fighting to steady my breath. Eventually, I forced myself to move, to pick up the clipboard, to finish the patrol like nothing had happened. But the eye stayed with me. Back on the main deck, the foreman was waiting. He studied me with those stone-gray eyes, his face unreadable. "You saw it," he said. Not a question, a statement. I swallowed hard. What is it?" His jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "It doesn't matter. You follow the rules, you live. You break them, you don't. That thing..." My voice cracked. It looked at me. It knew me. His gaze hardened. "Then you're lucky you didn't acknowledge it." I wanted to scream at him, demand answers, demand the truth. But the words withered in my throat. He turned away, leaving me standing there with shaking hands and a heart that wouldn't slow down. The rest of the shift was a blur. I went through the motions, tightening bolts, checking railings, but my eyes were always on the fog, searching for that shape, for that eye. Every wisp of mist felt like fingers reaching for me. When the shift finally ended, I stumbled back to my quarters, collapsed onto the cot, and pressed my hands over my eyes. But it didn't help. Behind my eyelids, the eye burned, glowing in the dark. Sleep never came. Only the endless, suffocating weight of being watched. By morning, I understood the truth. The fog wasn't weather, it was cover, and whatever lived in it was watching, waiting, learning. The night after I saw the thing in the fog, the rig felt heavier, like the steel itself remembered what had walked across it. Every corridor groaned, every pipe hissed, every shadow clung too long to the walls. The crew said nothing, as always, but their silence was different now, thicker, their movements sharper, more mechanical, as if the shape outside had seeped into their bones. I tried to convince myself I could survive this place if I just followed the rules. That was the only thought keeping me sane. The rules were lifelines. Strange, cruel, senseless, but lifelines all the same. Break them and the rig wouldn't just kill you. It would take you. I thought everyone understood that. I thought no one would dare test it. But I was wrong. It was Jensen who broke the rule. He was one of the quieter ones. Pale skin stretched thin over sharp bones, eyes sunken but restless. He'd worked the rig longer than me, though no one ever spoke of how long. No one ever spoke of anything personal out here. as if the rig punished even memory. That night, we gathered in the mess hall at the end of shift. The place was sterile and lifeless, long metal tables bolted to the floor, benches slick with grease, overhead lights buzzing like flies. The air smelled of salt, oil, and something rotten lingering in the vents. Dinner was the same gray slop I'd been choking down since arrival. I sat alone, staring at the plate, trying to will my stomach to accept it. Then I noticed Jensen at the far end of the hall. He was still eating. At first, I thought nothing of it. But then I checked my watch. 12:27 a.m. The rules flashed in my mind like fire. Never eat food prepared after midnight. The plate in front of Jensen was steaming, fresh from the kitchen. The cook, a hollow-eyed man whose name I never learned, stood frozen by the counter, watching with dead calm as Jensen shoveled food into his mouth. No one moved to stop him. No one even spoke. The mess hall was silent except for the wet sound of Jensen chewing, swallowing too fast, desperate. His eyes darted around, wide, frantic as if he wanted us to see. "Jensen," I whispered before I could stop myself. My voice cracked. "Don't." His head snapped toward me, lips shining with grease. He grinned, a wide, crooked thing that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm starving," he said. His voice echoed too loud in the silence. What do the rules know about hunger? The foreman was there too, standing at the doorway. His face was stone, his eyes sharp, but he didn't move. He didn't speak. Jensen stabbed his fork into the food again, shoving it into his mouth. "See?" he mumbled through a mouthful. "Nothing happens. It's just superstition. You're all sheep." He swallowed. The room changed. At first it was subtle, the hum of the lights dimming, the air growing colder. Then the smell hit, a rancid stench, thick and suffocating like rotting meat left out in the sun. My stomach lurched. Jensen froze mid-bite. His grin faltered. His throat worked as if the food had turned to stone. His eyes widened, bloodshot, veins bulging. Then he screamed. The sound tore through the mess hall, high and ragged, inhuman. He dropped the fork, clutching his throat, convulsing. His body writhed, jerking against the bench, knocking over his tray. The lights flickered. The shadows in the corners stretched long, twisting across the floor like black veins. Something moved in them. I couldn't breathe. None of us could. We sat frozen as Jensen's scream choked off into a wet gurgle. His body arched violently, then was yanked backward across the table as if invisible hands had grabbed him. He slid into the shadows, dragged so fast his boots left streaks of blood across the steel. The darkness swallowed him whole. Silence returned. The mess hall stank of rot. The lights buzzed weakly, and Jensen's plate still steamed on the table. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, the foreman stepped forward. He didn't look at us, didn't acknowledge what we'd just witnessed. He only stared at the empty spot where Jensen had been. His voice was flat, cold, final. The rules are not suggestions. He turned and walked out. One by one, the others followed. Faces pale, jaws clenched, eyes averted, as though nothing had happened, as though Jensen had never existed. I sat there staring at the steaming plate, my stomach churning. The food smelled stronger now, sickly sweet, like it was still alive. I forced myself to look away, to stand, to walk out of the mess hall on shaking legs. Back in my quarters, I collapsed onto the cot. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't erase the sound of Jensen's scream, the sight of his body sliding into the shadows, the way the rig itself seemed to feed on his disobedience. The rules weren't warnings. They weren't even protections. They were demands, and the rig was hungry, that night. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing Jensen's grin, his fork stabbing into steaming food after midnight. When sleep finally came, I dreamed of sitting at that same table, a plate steaming in front of me, voices whispering from the machinery, "Eat, eat, eat." I woke with my mouth full of rust and blood where I'd bitten my tongue. By the time Jensen was gone, something had shifted in all of us. No one mentioned him. No one dared speak his name, but the air carried the weight of his absence. The mess hall was quieter, the bunks colder, the corridors longer. We all walked a little faster, worked a little harder, kept our eyes lower. But no one forgot. The rig made sure of that. The next night I was sent to the drill platform. I'd seen it from a distance before, the massive structure at the center of everything, but I'd never been ordered close to it. The foreman gave me no instructions beyond a nod, but I didn't need him to explain. The rules echoed in my mind. Do not look into the drill shaft after dusk. The platform was a cathedral of steel, looming over the rest of the rig like the rib cage of some ancient beast. The drill towered above, a black spire vanishing into fog. Pipes crisscrossed in tangled veins, pulsing faintly with every shudder of the machinery. The whole structure thrummed with energy, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. I stepped onto the platform and the vibration hit me instantly. The steel hummed under my boots, buzzing up through my bones. The sound was deep, low, almost alive. I pressed a hand against one of the pipes and it felt warm. Too warm. The rhythm beneath my palm wasn't mechanical, it was organic. The longer I stood there, the more it changed. The steady hum warped into a slow inhale, a dragging exhale. The drill was breathing. At first I thought it was just my imagination, my fear twisting the normal sounds into something monstrous. But then the exhale carried a whisper. "Down!" I jerked back, heart pounding. The voice was faint, buried in the machinery, but it was there. Another inhale. Another exhale. "Look down!" My throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to put as much distance between myself and the drill as possible. But I couldn't move. My legs locked, my body frozen. The exhale came again, louder now, vibrating through the deck. "Down here. See me." The rule flared in my mind like a flare gun. Do not look into the drill shaft after dusk. I clenched my eyes shut, forcing myself to turn away, to stumble blindly toward the edge of the platform. But the voices swelled, multiplying, echoing through every pipe and gear. "Don't ignore us. We're waiting. Look, look, look." The platform shook beneath me, bolts rattling, chains clanging. My knees buckled. I fell forward, my hand slamming against the steel, my face inches from the edge of the shaft. The heat rising from it was unbearable, like standing over an open furnace. My skin prickled, sweat pouring down my face. My eyelids fluttered, fighting to stay closed. Something pulled at me, a pressure in my skull, a gravity dragging my gaze downward. I bit my tongue until blood filled my mouth. "Do not look. Do not look." A hand gripped my shoulder, hard. I flinched, spinning around. It was one of the crew, a man I'd barely noticed before, his face hollow, eyes dead. He shook his head once, slowly, then pulled me back from the edge. His grip was iron, fingers digging into flesh. When he let go, his eyes lingered on mine. For a flicker of a second, I saw something behind them, fear. Not the dull emptiness most of them carried, but raw terror. He turned away without a word and vanished into the fog. The whispers died down. The breathing slowed. The platform settled into its usual hum. I staggered back, trembling, my body weak. My throat burned with swallowed screams. I didn't finish my inspection. I couldn't. I stumbled back across the rig, head low, ears ringing with the echoes of those voices. That night in my quarters, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The breathing didn't stop. It followed me, rattling through the walls, whispering through the pipes. At some point, I pressed my ear to the steel. My heart stopped. The drill wasn't pulling oil. It wasn't pulling gas. It was pulling something alive. And whatever it was, it wanted me to look. By then, I was certain the rig wasn't a machine at all. It was a carcass of steel animated by something deeper, something older, something that had been waiting beneath the ocean long before we built towers on its back. The rules weren't safety measures, they were appeasements. And every time one was broken, the rig took a piece of us. Jensen had proved that. His screams still gnawed at me. But the rig wasn't done showing me what it could do. It started on a night like the others, fog choking the decks, the sea silent as a grave. I was assigned to clean the walkways near the west platform, scraping rust and wiping down railings no one would ever touch. It was mindless work, the kind meant to keep your body moving while your mind unraveled. The air was heavy that night, so still it pressed against my skin like a weight. My breath came loud in the silence, each scrape of the brush too sharp. Then I heard the footsteps, slow, deliberate, wet. I froze, brush trembling in my hand. The steps grew louder, squelching against the deck, leaving faint smears behind them. My chest tightened, lungs refusing to draw air. Out of the fog came a figure. At first I thought it was just another crewman. The uniform was the same, grease-stained coveralls, boots heavy on the steel. But as he drew closer, the light caught his face, and my stomach dropped. It was Keller. Keller had died 3 nights ago. I hadn't known him well, but I'd heard the story whispered in the mess hall. A fall from one of the upper cranes. No body recovered. Just a smear of blood on the deck, washed away by the sea. But here he was. His skin was pale, bloated, slick with seawater. His eyes were glassy, unfocused, but his hands moved with practiced ease as he dragged a mop across the deck. Water dripped from his sleeves, pooling at his feet. But he kept scrubbing, pushing the mop back and forth with mechanical rhythm. My throat clenched. I wanted to run, to scream, to demand someone else see what I was seeing. But the rules thundered in my mind. Do not make eye contact with the dead. So I kept my head down, forcing my eyes to the rust, to the brush in my hand, to anything but Keller's drowned face. Still, I could feel him. Every pass of his mop drew closer, the slosh of water scraping against my nerves. He stopped only a few feet from me. I couldn't help it. I glanced up. Just for a second, his eyes were on me. Glass orbs, lifeless, staring. His lips parted and a trickle of seawater spilled out, dribbling down his chin. He didn't speak, but the look was enough. A hollow warning. A silent accusation. I dropped my brush and staggered back, my breath ragged. Keller didn't move toward me. He just turned, dragging his mop, slopping water across the deck, vanishing back into the fog as if pulled by unseen strings. I collapsed against the railing, heart hammering, sweat cold on my skin. When I finally stumbled back to the main platform, I saw the others. They hadn't reacted. They hadn't even looked up. A few men passed by the wet streaks on the deck without flinching. They had seen him too. They always saw. They just knew better than to acknowledge it. I couldn't eat that night. The mess hall stank of salt water, though no one else seemed to notice. The crew ate in silence, their jaws moving like machines. But all I could see was Keller's bloated face, the way water poured from his mouth like words that never formed. Back in my quarters, I sat on the cot, knees drawn to my chest, rocking like a child. The whispers in the pipes had grown louder, clearer, almost eager. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. At dawn, when the fog began to thin, I heard the mop again. Slow, wet, endless, and I realized something worse than death lived on this rig. The dead never left. They worked the same shifts, walked the same corridors, carried out the same meaningless tasks, bound to the rig, enslaved to its hunger, until there was nothing left of them but bloated flesh and hollow eyes. And one day, if I failed, if I broke a rule, if I slipped just once, that would be me. By now the rules had carved themselves into my brain. They weren't reminders anymore. They were survival instincts as natural as breathing. Rule 1. Never leave your quarters between 2:13 a.m. and 3 a.m. Rule 2. Ignore the voices. Rule 3. No food after midnight. Rule 4. Never look into the drill shaft. Rule 5. Sleep only in your assigned quarters. That last one didn't make sense at first. Out here, a cot was a cot. A bench, a corner, a steel floor. Anywhere could be a place to close your eyes when exhaustion crushed you. But the rules were absolute. And I was about to learn why. It happened after a 40-hour cycle without real rest. The foreman had us working double, inspecting rusted beams, patching corroded pipes, tightening bolts that loosened themselves as though the rig rejected our efforts. Every muscle screamed, my eyes burned, my thoughts frayed. When the shift ended, I staggered into the mess hall, collapsed onto a bench, and told myself I'd only close my eyes for a second. The second stretched. My head dipped. My breathing slowed, and then the air changed. I woke with a start, but I wasn't in the mess hall anymore. At least not the one I knew. The lights were out, every bulb shattered, glass crunching beneath my boots. The benches were gone. The walls dripped with black water, pooling on the floor, reflecting faint light from nowhere. A foul stench choked me, salt, rot, oil, and something sweet like decaying fruit. The room pulsed. Not with machinery, but with life. The steel walls flexed as though they were ribs, expanding and contracting with each monstrous breath. Something moved in the dark. I staggered back, my foot sinking into water that rose ankle-deep. The surface rippled, and faces formed beneath it. Hundreds of them, pale and bloated, eyes open, mouths moving silently. Their hands pressed against the underside, clawing upward, but the surface held like glass. My chest locked. My voice caught in my throat. I remembered the rule. Sleep only in your assigned quarters." I had broken it. The water erupted. Hands burst through, clawing, grabbing my legs, my arms, my chest. Cold fingers wrapped around my throat, pulling me down. The faces screamed now, their mouths splitting wide, water pouring out in torrents. Their voices merged into a chorus of agony, shrieking, begging, damning. I thrashed, kicked, clawed, but the grip was iron. My lungs burned. The water rose past my waist, my chest, my throat. I gasped and swallowed salt. Through the chaos, I saw them, the crew. They stood on the far side of the room, watching silently. Their faces were blank, their eyes hollow. Not one moved to help. Not one even blinked. The water swallowed me whole. I sank deeper and deeper, the faces pressing closer, teeth gnashing, eyes wide. My chest convulsed, bubbles tearing from my lips. In the depths, something stirred. It wasn't the drowned workers. It wasn't even the rig. It was something older, something vast, coiled beneath the ocean's skin. Its presence filled the water, its voice vibrating in my bones. "Mine," it whispered. "You are mine," I screamed, but only salt filled my throat. And then, I was back in the mess hall. The benches, the lights, the smell of grease and oil. My chest heaved, lungs raw, water dripping from my hair though the floor was bone dry. My hands bore the marks of fingernails dug deep into flesh. The crew ate silently, trays clattering, eyes averted. None of them looked at me. None of them acknowledged what had happened, but I knew they'd seen. I stumbled out, gasping, and collapsed in my quarters. I didn't dare close my eyes again. Not outside these walls. Not ever. The rules weren't arbitrary. They weren't tradition. They were bindings. Each one was a thread in a fragile net, keeping the thing below from swallowing us whole. Break them, and the net tore. That night, I learned the truth of Rule 5. Sleep anywhere else, and the sea came for you. By then, the rules weren't guidance. They were chains, dragging me through each day and each night. I lived by them the way a drowning man clings to driftwood. But the longer I stayed, the clearer it became. The rig wasn't here to pull oil or gas or anything human hands could use. It was pulling something else. The whispers had grown worse. They followed me everywhere, through the pipes, beneath the floors, even inside my head when the machinery was silent. They no longer begged or pleaded. They tempted. They promised. They whispered things I should not have known. My childhood secrets, the shame I thought buried, the regrets I never spoke aloud. And always, they urged me toward the ocean. It began one dawn. I was on perimeter duty, fog lapping low across the decks, the sea flat as polished glass. My boots clanged against the grating, my breath clouding in the frigid air. That's when I felt it, a pull, not physical, not at first, but undeniable. A gravity in my chest, drawing my eyes toward the railing, toward the endless water stretching to the horizon. The rules burned in my mind. Never stare into the ocean at dawn. I tried to resist. I told myself I was stronger. I told myself I would survive. But my eyes slid anyway, as if dragged by invisible strings. The fog parted, and I saw it. The water wasn't water. Not then. It was a mirror, black and glassy, reflecting not the sky but the abyss below. Shapes moved in it, massive, coiled, writhing. Pale forms twisted beneath the surface, too big to belong to anything I knew, too vague to fully comprehend. One shape rose higher, closer, pressing against the skin of the ocean like a hand against glass. The surface trembled but didn't break. An eye opened. It was enormous, filling my vision, glowing faintly with colors I couldn't name. It wasn't just looking, it was knowing, peeling me open layer by layer, reading every thought I'd ever had. My knees buckled. My breath stopped. The whispers surged, screaming over one another until they merged into one terrible voice. "Come down!" I stumbled back, clutching my head, tears streaming from my eyes. The voice shook me to the core, rattling my bones, splitting my skull. My vision darkened. For a moment, I swore I was falling, plummeting through endless black water toward the thing waiting below. Hands gripped my shoulders. I gasped, blinking, and saw the foreman dragging me back from the railing. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes were filled with something close to fear. "You almost broke it," he hissed. His voice was sharper than I'd ever heard, trembling at the edges. "Never look, never," I choked, unable to speak. My chest heaved, my lungs raw. He shook me once, hard, then shoved me toward the interior. The ocean doesn't want oil. It wants us. The drill feeds it. We keep it calm. That's all this place is. That's all it's ever been. My legs barely carried me back through the corridors. The walls dripped, the pipes rattled, the whispers followed. But one thought drowned out everything else. The rig wasn't harvesting. It was feeding. Every bolt tightened, every shift worked, every rule followed. It was all part of keeping the thing below satisfied. Every time we obeyed, we bought ourselves another day. Every time someone broke a rule, the thing was given a piece of them. I collapsed onto my cot, shaking, the foreman's words echoing in my skull. We weren't workers. We weren't men, we were offerings. By then, I thought I understood the rig. I thought I had pieced together its hunger, its rules, the fragile order that kept us alive one night at a time. But there was still one rule left, one that made no sense to me until the night I saw what happened to a man who tried to leave. Rule 7, never resign. Leaving the rig is forbidden. The words had gnawed at me since the first day. They sounded absurd. This was a job, just a job. If I wanted to quit, if I wanted to go home, I should have been able to. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. But on the rig, nothing was that simple. It was Harker who broke the 7th rule. Harker had been here longer than most. He was thick-shouldered, scarred, his face always set in a grim scowl. He worked harder than anyone, moved faster, spoke less. But he had the eyes of a trapped animal, always darting to the fog, the shadows, the pipes, like he knew something none of us did. One night after shift, I saw him in the mess hall, clutching a crumpled letter in his fist. His lips moved soundlessly, reading the words over and over. His eyes glistened. It was the first time I'd seen emotion on that dead face. The foreman stood at the far end of the room, silent, watching. "I'm done," Harker said suddenly. His voice cracked through the silence like a hammer. He slammed the letter onto the table. "I've had enough. My daughter's waiting for me. I won't rot here another day." The room froze. Forks clattered to trays. No one spoke. No one even breathed. The foreman's face didn't change. His eyes were two pits of stone. "You know the rule. I don't care about your damned rules," Harker roared. His voice shook with fury and grief. "I quit. I'm leaving on the next supply ship. And none of you can stop me." The foreman didn't move. He only whispered, almost tender, "You already belong to it." Harker spat at his boots, then stormed out. No one followed. I couldn't sleep that night. The rig groaned louder than usual, the fog thicker, the whispers shriller. It felt like the whole place was waiting, listening. At dawn, I heard the engines of the supply ship. I ran to the lower platform, heart hammering. Harker was already there, hauling his duffel over his shoulder. His boots rang against the steel as he strode toward the gangway. His face was set with determination, with defiance. The boat crew stood frozen, eyes wide, pale with dread. They didn't move to help him aboard. They didn't even lower the ramp. Harker cursed, throwing his bag onto the deck, then jumped down himself. The sea exploded. Something unseen surged from the water, a force so violent it rocked the entire rig. The gangway bent, the lower platform groaned, and Harker screamed as he was yanked backward into the waves. I ran to the railing. For a moment I saw him thrashing, arms flailing, mouth wide. The water around him foamed red, but there was no shape, no hand, no creature I could see. Just the ocean itself, devouring him. He sank in seconds. His scream cut off. The surface smoothed, black and still. The supply boat's engines roared. The crew stared straight ahead, refusing to look back, and the vessel turned sharply, vanishing into the fog. I stood there trembling, my fingers digging into the railing until they bled. Behind me, the foreman spoke. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it chilled me more than anything else I'd heard on this cursed rig. "No one leaves. Not until the sea decides." I turned to him, my mouth dry, my heart pounding. "What are we to it? Why us?" His eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw cracks in his stone face, weariness, grief, resignation. "We're not workers," he said softly. "We're anchors, offerings. As long as we stay, as long as we follow the rules, it feeds slow. It waits. But if we leave..." His gaze drifted toward the black water where Harker had vanished. "It takes us whole." I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. My body shook, my mind screaming for escape. But there was no escape. The rules weren't meant to keep us alive. They were meant to keep us here. Bound to the rig, bound to the thing below. I returned to my quarters that morning hollow, broken. I sat on the cot, staring at the rusted ceiling, whispering the rules to myself like prayers, because now I knew the truth. The seventh rule wasn't about resignation. It wasn't about quitting a job. It was about ownership. Once you set foot on this rig, you belong to it, forever. The sea had been restless for days. Even when the fog lay heavy, even when the surface looked still, I could feel it beneath the steel. A slow roll, a shift, a tension in the water pressing against the rig's supports. The air itself felt swollen, too thick to breathe. We all felt it. The crew moved faster, sharper, but their silence was more brittle than ever. Even the foreman seemed strained, his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed too long on the horizon, though there was nothing to see but fog and waves. The rules still held us together, but barely. Every shift became a ritual. Every meal was chewed in silence. Every night, men sat awake on their cots, eyes fixed on the walls, waiting for whispers that never stopped. We were stretched thin, and the rig knew it. Then the storm came. It began with a wind, a low howl that rose through the pipes, rattling bolts and chains. The floodlights swung on their mounts, beams slicing through fog that churned unnaturally fast. The sea slapped against the pillars with more force than I'd ever felt. By midnight, the rig was screaming. Metal groaned, beams bent, ladders shook. The deck tilted under our boots as waves the size of buildings crashed against the supports. The storm had no lightning, no thunder, just endless wind, endless black water, endless fog, and beneath it all, the breathing. The drill platform pulsed like a beating heart, the machinery heaving with every inhale, rattling with every exhale. The pipes convulsed, spraying bursts of steam that hissed like whispers. We tried to work. We tightened bolts, strapped down crates, fought to keep the rig standing. But it was futile. Every repair unraveled instantly, as though unseen hands tore apart our efforts. Then came the shadows. They rose with the storm, stretching across the deck, slithering along railings, twisting into shapes too vast to comprehend. They weren't fog. They weren't men. They were something else, limbs bending in wrong directions, heads splitting and reforming. One of the crew broke. He dropped his wrench, screaming, and bolted across the catwalk. He didn't make it 3 steps before the shadow swallowed him. He vanished without sound, without trace. No one moved to help. The foreman barked orders, his voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. But even he couldn't mask the tremor beneath his words. His eyes were wild, darting to the drill, the sea, the sky. I tried to cling to the rules. Stay in your quarters between 2:13 and 3. Don't answer the voices. Don't eat after midnight. Don't look into the drill shaft. Sleep only in your bunk. Don't stare into the sea at dawn. Don't resign. But what did rules matter now? The storm was tearing the rig apart. At 2:13 exactly, the air shifted. My watch ticked, and I felt it. The change, the pressure, the silence deeper than silence. The crew froze. Tools dropped. Conversations died. Every man stood rigid, eyes darting, waiting. The doors rattled. The pipes moaned. The shadows thickened. Something walked the decks. I couldn't see it fully, not through the storm and the fog, but I felt its weight. The steel sagged beneath its steps, the railings bowed, the towers bent. It circled us, slower than before, deliberate. And then it spoke, not through the pipes, not through whispers, but through the storm itself. A voice so vast it shook the rig to its foundations. "The rules are broken." The words pounded in my skull, vibrating in my bones. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, teeth rattling in my skull. One by one, the lights burst. Glass shattered, sparks rained, plunging us into blackness. The only light came from the sea itself, glowing faintly, pulsing with every breath of the thing below. I crawled toward the interior, dragging myself through the dark. Around me, men screamed, short, sharp, cut off mid-breath. The shadows were claiming them, swallowing them whole. The foreman's voice rang out once, hoarse, furious. "Hold your ground! Obey the rules!" But the storm drowned him. When I reached the corridor, the walls were flexing, metal groaning like bones breaking. Water burst through the seams, flooding the floor, carrying the stink of rot and brine. I stumbled, slipping, clawing my way toward my quarters. My body screamed for rest, but the rules burned in my mind. Stay in your bunk. Stay in your bunk. I slammed the door, collapsed onto the cot, and curled into myself. The storm howled outside. The rig bent, shook, screamed like a dying animal, and in the heart of it all, the drill shaft roared, breathing faster and faster, pulling something vast and ancient closer to the surface. I don't know how long I lay there, clutching the cot like it could save me. Minutes, hours, time didn't exist in that storm. The walls shook, the ceiling dripped, the floor trembled like the rig itself was about to collapse. My ears rang with whispers, screams, and the low, endless breathing from below. Then the door to my quarters shuddered. The handle twisted once, slow, deliberate. A pause, then again harder. The metal groaned under the pressure. I squeezed my eyes shut, clamped my hands over my ears, and whispered the rule over and over. Do not leave your quarters between 2:13 and 3 hour. Do not leave. The handle stopped, but the storm didn't. The deck tilted sharply. My cot slammed against the wall, throwing me to the floor. Water poured under the door, black and reeking, carrying with it bits of rust, oil, and something softer. Flesh, torn and drifting. I crawled onto the cot, clutching the rails as the room rocked like a sinking ship. The screams outside grew fainter, swallowed by the roar of the ocean. Then, silence. It was so sudden, so complete, it rang louder than the storm. The rig went still beneath me. The water settled. The whispers stopped. I dared to look. The flood had receded. The floor was dry. The walls no longer flexed. My door stood shut, still scarred but unmoving. I thought for a moment that it was over. Then the cot shifted beneath me. It wasn't the rig moving now. It was the cot itself, vibrating, pulsing. I scrambled off it, stumbling back as the thin mattress bulged upward, as though something inside was trying to crawl out. The seams split. Hands burst through. Pale, bloated, familiar. Jensen. His face tore through the fabric, water pouring from his mouth, eyes glassy, staring. His hands clawed for me, nails scraping rust from the floor. His lips moved, bubbles rising, and I heard it, not with my ears, but inside my skull. Join us! I screamed, kicking the cot, slamming the frame until it toppled. Water gushed from it, spilling across the floor, dragging Jensen's corpse back into blackness. The mattress deflated, sagging into nothing but wet cloth and broken springs. I staggered back against the wall, shaking so violently I thought my bones would snap. My breath came in shallow gasps, my chest tight with panic. The whispers returned, louder now, filling every pipe, every seam, every inch of steel. They weren't pleading anymore. They were laughing. The rig shuddered. The drill roared, and then came the final breath. It wasn't through the machinery. It wasn't through the pipes. It came from the ocean itself, a sound so vast it dwarfed the storm. The sea exhaled and the rig sank. Not far. Not fast. Just enough for every man left alive to feel it. The steel groaned. Rivets popped. Water surged through the corridors. The floodlights flickered once, then died. We were in the dark. The rig was falling. I don't remember how I made it out of my quarters. I remember water rising to my chest, my throat, my mouth. I remember the corridors twisting, stretching, pulling me deeper no matter which way I turned. I remember the foreman's voice, faint but steady, somewhere above the chaos. Hold fast. Don't break! It's not done with us yet. And then his scream. When I surfaced, if that word even applies, I was back on the deck. The fog was gone. The storm had stilled, but the rig was broken. Towers leaned at impossible angles. Beams hung twisted like ribs torn open. The drill shaft glowed faintly, breathing smoke, pulsing with light from beneath. The sea was calm. Too calm. I staggered, half-drowned, coughing brine, my body bruised and torn. The crew was gone. No footsteps, no whispers of men. Only shadows moved, sliding into the broken towers, vanishing into cracks in the steel, and below me, through the trembling grating, I saw it. Not the fog, not the shapes, not the fragments. It. The thing the rig had been feeding. Its body stretched beyond vision. Coils thicker than the towers, pale and slick, wrapping endlessly through the deep. Its mouth was a canyon of teeth, its breath the tide itself. Its eyes opened one by one, glowing in the abyss, each one fixed on me. The rig shuddered again, sinking lower, and I realized the collapse wasn't an accident. It wasn't the storm. It was the end of the bargain. The rules had held it at bay. The rules had fed it slowly. But the rules were broken, and now it was claiming everything. I fell to my knees, choking on salt, whispering the rules like prayers, like confessions, like last words. But the ocean didn't care. The rig moaned, bent, screamed, and began to fall. Not just into the sea, into it. The rig is gone now. I don't know how I'm still alive or if that word even means anything anymore. Alive. Breathing, heart beating. But when I close my eyes, I feel the water in my lungs, taste the salt in my throat, hear the grinding of steel collapsing into the abyss. Maybe I didn't survive. Maybe I never left the rig. Maybe I'm already one of them, those hollow men who mop the decks long after they're dead, who obey the rules even when the sea has claimed their souls. But I need to tell this. Someone has to hear it, because the rules were never meant to save us. They were meant to bind us. The last night wasn't a night at all. It was an ending. When the rig began to sink, I clung to the railings, screaming, sobbing, my voice drowned by the roar of collapsing steel. Towers crumpled, catwalks snapped, platforms folded into the waves. The ocean glowed beneath, pale and sickly, alive with the movement of the thing we'd been feeding all along. Men were dragged under, some by the water, some by shadows, some simply vanishing mid-scream. The foreman was last. I saw him clinging to the drill tower, his mouth open in defiance, his eyes fixed on me. For a moment, I thought he would call another order, bark another rule. But instead he whispered, too faint to hear, too soft to matter. And then he was gone, swallowed by the sea. I ran. Not toward safety, there was none, but because my body couldn't stop. I ran across tilting decks, through corridors that filled with water, over beams slick with blood and oil. My mind screamed the rules at me, a litany I couldn't silence. Never leave your quarters at 2:13. Never answer the voices. Never eat after midnight. Never look into the shaft. Never sleep outside your bunk. Never stare into the sea at dawn. Never resign, but the rules meant nothing now. They had been lies, distractions, bargains written in rust. And the sea had grown tired of waiting. I stumbled into the mess hall, water lapping at my knees. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. In the dark, the tables stretched into infinity, covered in steaming plates of food. Hands clawed up from beneath, dragging themselves onto the surface, dripping water and rot. Faces I knew, Jensen, Keller, Harker, all grinning through bloated lips, chewing endlessly, whispering with mouths full, "Eat." I bolted, crashing through the kitchen, into the storage rooms. Shadows bent around me, doors leading nowhere, ladders twisting upward into black voids. Every corridor became a maze, every turn leading deeper into the rig's body, into its lungs, its veins, its heart. At last, I reached the drill platform, or what was left of it. The tower leaned at a sickening angle, cables snapping like whips, sparks sprang into the storm. The shaft below glowed, pulsing, breathing, and for the first time I understood. The drill wasn't extracting anything. It was a mouth. The rig had been feeding it, slowly, carefully, one rule at a time. And now it was done waiting. The shaft gaped open, wide and endless, light pouring upward in beams of pale green. The fog swirled into it, the storm funneled around it, the sea itself bent toward it. And beneath, I saw coils, endless coils, twisting and writhing, pale flesh glistening with brine. The eye opened again, wider than the rig itself, unblinking, filled with light that seared my vision. It fixed on me, always me, and I understood the seventh rule at last. Never resign, not because quitting was forbidden. Because quitting was impossible. Once you came here, you belonged to it. Your body, your mind, your soul, anchors for its hunger, fuel for its growth. The rules weren't meant to protect us. They were meant to keep us obedient long enough to be useful. The deck buckled beneath me. I fell to my knees, staring into the shaft, into the abyss. The voices rose from below, 1,000 screams, 1,000 pleas, 1,000 lies. My mother's voice again. Jensen's scream. The foreman's whisper. Join us. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it was inside me now. My head throbbed, my chest heaved, my body begged to give in, to jump, to fall, to surrender. The light swallowed everything. I don't remember making the decision. One moment I was kneeling at the edge of the shaft, light burning my eyes, voices clawing through my skull. The next I was falling. The air vanished. Salt filled my lungs. The roar of the rig faded into a low, steady hum like a heartbeat. But I wasn't falling into water. I was falling through something else. Darkness pressed against me from every side, not liquid, not air, something heavier. Shapes brushed past, limbs, faces, hands. Eyes opened in the black, blinking slowly, watching me tumble past. Some I recognized: Jensen, Keller, Harker, their mouths opening and closing soundlessly, their bodies twisting into the coils of something larger. I reached out and my hand passed through one of them. It dissolved into a cloud of ash and water, then reformed further below, still staring. Then I hit the bottom, not a surface, a pulse, flesh, endless and slick, coiling around itself like a living labyrinth. I landed on it but didn't sink. It was warm, beating, alive. The eye opened again, so close I could see the veins in its surface pulsing with light. Mine. The word wasn't a whisper, it was a verdict. I clawed at the flesh, trying to crawl away, but it curved upward, carrying me like a conveyor toward the center of its gaze. The voices rose again, not whispers now, but a single sound, a deep, resonant tone that rattled my bones. And then, abruptly, everything stopped. The light dimmed. The flesh stilled. The eye closed. I was alone. I don't know how I got out. One moment I was there, pinned under its gaze. The next I was on a piece of twisted deck plating floating on an endless black sea. The rig was gone, the towers gone, the fog gone. Only water stretching forever in every direction, silent and still. The sky above was pale gray. The horizon had no line. My body was soaked, bruised, cut but alive, or maybe not. There were no supply ships. No birds, no sound of engines. Just the slow lap of water against metal and the faint echo of breathing beneath it. I've been here ever since. I don't know how many days. The sun rises and sets but never moves. My wounds don't heal, but they don't fester either. I don't eat. I don't drink. I don't sleep. Sometimes I think I hear Jensen mopping somewhere far off. Sometimes I think I see the foreman's face in the waves. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I feel the rig still beneath me, pulsing, breathing, waiting. I whisper the rules to myself. Over and over, even though there's no one left to hear, no one left to break them. They're etched into me now, carved into bone. Never leave your quarters between 2:13 a.m. and 3:00 a.m. Do not respond to voices in the machinery. Never eat food prepared after midnight. Do not look into the drill shaft after dusk. Sleep only in your assigned quarters. Never stare into the ocean at dawn. Never resign. The rules weren't a list. They were a prayer. They were a contract. And I think deep down, that's why I'm still here. Because I haven't resigned. Because I still belong to it. Because the thing beneath the waves isn't finished with me yet. Maybe this is my confession. Maybe this is my offering. Maybe these words will reach someone, somewhere, and they'll read them the way I once read the rules etched into rusted steel. If you're reading this, don't come looking. Don't take the job. Don't set foot on the rig, because once you're here, you're never leaving. The sea remembers every anchor it's ever claimed. And it's hungry. Always hungry. And if you're hearing my voice now, it already knows your name.